The unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So once again, I'd like to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Those here and those who are not. May we have a better year this year than the last one was. We hope for the best. Today it seems like a good day to talk about Maitreya, the Buddha that is to come, whose festival we just celebrated. It seems like it's a wonderful Bodhisattva to celebrate on the first of the year. He is the Bodhisattva of hope and joy. And he's also the loving one. His name, Maitreya, means the loving one, from Maitri, or Mitra means friend, so like friendly loving one. And Metta, loving kindness, so, very benevolent. The future Buddha, the Buddha that is to come, is said to be waiting in the Tushita heaven for his time to be reborn as the next Buddha. There's been lots of Buddhas before Shakyamuni and lots of Buddhas to come after, which is encouraging for us. There's never a time there are no Buddhas to be seen or heard or anywhere. They talk about the Dharma ending age, but then a new Buddha will come. It's always the Dharma ending age, but actually people still practice, they still train, they still do their best. And there's always this line of Buddhas. Well, he's said to be waiting in the Tushita heaven, waiting to be reborn as the next Buddha. He's the oldest of the Bodhisattvas. The Buddha talks about him in a whole scripture, actually, and says that he will be preaching the Dharma just as Shakyamuni preached the Dharma. So it's never completely gone from our world. People see Bodhisattvas as beings. Some people do, as actual beings. And maybe they are. Bodhisattvas appear to people in all kinds of mysterious ways. And for some of us it means it's more like aspects that we try to cultivate within our own training. And I find it easier to think of that because it's something we can do. Instead of waiting for Maitreya to show up, we have to kind of work on our own loving kindness, our own benevolence, kindness, hope and joy. Buddhas, the lineage of Buddhas, that succession of Buddhas, it means Buddha nature is always here. There's always innate goodness in our world, innate goodness in all beings. We are all part of Buddha nature, no matter what it looks like. We keep saying this. We see it more clearly in some people than in others. Some people it's radiant, some people it's not so radiant. But who are we to judge? Who are we to know? What it's like for another person, and what goodness there is in there, just waiting to be called forth. Some people have very difficult lives. We can see the Buddha nature in the natural beauty of our world. The lovely sunrise we had this morning, or a rubbish dump. It's always here, whether we see it or not. It doesn't depend on us to see it, but it helps when we do, or at least that we look towards it, that we have faith that Buddha nature is there, is here. And the Dharma, the teachings of all this lineage of Buddhas, the Dharma is always here, ready for us to find it and practice it. Because the Dharma is the truth of our lives, it's the truth of being, it's not just something that a few people practice and believe in. And it really helps when there's a Buddha to point it out for us. Maitreya represents that promise. Buddha nature is always here. The Dharma is always here. And he points us to it. Points us to ourselves. There is always a way to find it. And he helps us to see that. Well, there's different forms of Maitreya, different representations, He's very old, as I said, and his first statues came out around about the same time as the first Buddha statues, the first Shakyamuni statues. because they didn't make images of Shakyamuni for a long time, something like the 2nd century after, in the Christian era. The great Bamiyan Buddhas were Maitreyas, actually. There's a huge Buddha in China sitting on a river. Rav Master Daishan's seen it. Great big seated Buddha with his feet down, as Maitreya does. He's a Maitreya. So, big. Sitting with his feet down, ready to get up and help beings. He doesn't have to unfold himself and all that. He's ready. Just a simple thing. I'm ready to help. He's working on himself, but he's ready to get up and help where needed. Ready to get up and come to help the world. Then there's the Contemplative Maitreya, who isn't yet a Buddha yet. This is the form you often see in the Chinese and the Japanese and Korean representation. He's got one foot crossed on the other knee, and he's got a hand to his cheek, like this picture up here. It's a very famous image. I think many of us have seen it. He's perfecting his virtues, not just thinking about himself, not just sitting there waiting to be the next Buddha. Well, I'm just hanging out. He's contemplating, perfecting his virtues, and he has just a little Bodhisattva crown. Doesn't have a great big one like Samantabhadra and the others. Little Bodhisattva crown, because he's not ready yet to be the Buddha. He's still working on himself, and he's looking down at beings suffering in the world, in all the worlds, and contemplating these beings and how he can help them, not just thinking about his own stuff. How can I help beings? And that's why he wants to come and be the next Buddha. Apparently, in Kyoto, where there's a very famous Buddha of this kind, there's a weeping Maitreya who is leaning over and looking at the beings and crying because he's so moved by their suffering, and is filled with compassion like Avalokiteshvara. So the loving one, the benevolent one, who sees the suffering of the world. There's all sorts of stories of Maitreya helping people out of trouble. There's Su Yun, the great Chinese master, Empty Cloud. Of course, I looked for the story and couldn't find it, but I remember he got lost in the snow on his way to a temple, and it was getting dark, and a monk comes and helps him, guides him and shows him the way, and then disappears. And later on, Empty Cloud said, mentions him to the monk, and said, "Oh yes, that was Maitreya," as though it happened all the time. Well, maybe it did. Maybe Maitreya is always guiding people up there. How do we know? Then there's a laughing Buddha, which is much more, in China particularly, in all the temples, you have a picture of Maitreya as the laughing Buddha, the sort of jolly fat one, usually sitting down and laughing, filled with joy and merriment. The next Buddha that is to come. And each temple, there's a shrine for Maitreya in that form in the Chinese temples. I've seen lots of them, lovely. And this image was based on an actual person, a monk who was called Putai, or in Japanese called Hote. And he would walk around with a sack full of goodies and candy and toys and stuff and give them to children. You just walk around. This is what he did. Gave stuff to. I didn't wait. People must have given him all these things. Then he'd give them to the kids, or other people. Just really generous, open-hearted, simple, loving person, greatly loved for his kindness. And the reason why they think he was Maitreya is because when he was dying, he recited this verse: "Maitreya, Maitreya everywhere, yet people do not see him." And they thought, "Oh, maybe that was Maitreya." And so they made him Maitreya. When they have images of him, they have the images of this fat and smiling monk who just gave things away, benevolent, loving heart. And they made statues of him, they venerated him, and he had venerated him for centuries actually. Because, as they said, in the Tushita heaven where he dwells, anyone can go. You don't have to be special, you don't have to be virtuous particularly, you just have a little faith in Maitreya, and you can be reborn there. He doesn't set a high bar. You're welcome. Well, it's said that Maitreya was originally one of the Buddha's disciples called Ajita. Now, Ajita wasn't a very impressive trainee. He seemed kind of foolish and naive and not that great. But it was predicted that he'd be the next Buddha, and everybody was very surprised. Him? Ajita? What? What about Shariputra and these other guys? No, Ajita. And he also shows up in the Lotus Sutra, this fame-seeker bodhisattva, greedy for fame and profit, just wanting stuff, didn't care that much about things, lazy, careless. He could learn the scriptures and then forget them because he wasn't that, dedicated. And Manjusri goes on and on. He's talking to Maitreya, and he says, this person, he was just a terrible trainee. He goes on and on about his faults, and he said, that was you, Well, Maitreya's changed since then. He's now a bodhisattva, the next Buddha. But the thing was, he was very kind-hearted. With this not very good training, he had a kind heart, and that was what people remembered. That's a great virtue, the kindly heart, Well, all of these aspects of Maitreya can be helpful for us in our present day and age, that aspect of hope and joy. Knowing Maitreya started off as not a very good trainee, a bit lazy, not very bright, sounds like me, kind-hearted, foretold to be the next Buddha because of that kind heart. That was the thing. Even though he wasn't very good in seemingly so many ways, he had that generous and kind heart, simple kindness. We all know the power of kindness, how it makes a deep impression on us. And so it is with Ajita. Oh, yes, and the fame-seeker bodhisattva. The same thing, this kindly heart. So we have that aspect too. We can manifest that form. As Reverend Master says in one of our invocations, he who once was as we are now, great Maitreya Buddha, now appears to show us how to be Maitreya Buddha. We have that potential. We can become Buddha. Doesn't mean we're going to be some great being in the sky surrounded by disciples, but just that manifest that Buddha nature, that kindness and that purity of heart. We might feel like Ajita, as I said. We're not the best of trainees, we're not as dedicated as we might be, our meditation isn't all that great, we have trouble keeping the precepts, whatever it might be. Well, can we practice kindness? Yes, we can do that. We can work on all these other aspects, all our shortcomings, and we can practice kindness. We can be generous in our actions, and in our words and our speech about other people, and in our thoughts about people. Letting go of that critical mind, There's a huge need for kindness. There always has been, but today, in our present world, great need for kindness, because there's so much discord, so much suffering, so much sadness, so much fear, worry, angst, darkness for people. Kindness is a great blessing. And we can practice kindness and generosity to ourselves as well, not just to other beings, to ourselves, seeing ourselves with kindness. And Maitreya is perfecting his virtues, He's not just sitting up there in the teacher ahead of him waiting for his turn. He's perfecting his virtue. He's working on himself, working on what he needs to work on still. His little crown isn't full yet. He still has work to do, like us. We still have work to do. We can look at our own mind, contemplating, He's sitting here looking at his mind. There's this lovely story of Ryokan. As a layperson, Ryokan is a great monk who was a poet. He was very eccentric. And when he was still a layperson, he was sweeping out in the temple grounds somewhere. And there was a statue of Maitreya, I think, nearby. And a couple of the novices are talking about, saying, what's he doing? Is Maitreya sitting like this in his contemplative pose? And what's his name? Ryokan, thank you. Losing my train. Ryokan, still is a layperson, not yet called Ryokan, sees these guys and he says, the Bodhisattva is working on his mind. And the novices sort of think, whoa, Well, of course he is working on his mind, the Bodhisattva, Maitreya. contemplating what he needs yet to do. Like us, we still have work to do. We're never done. Ryokan himself, he had all kinds of, he was very eccentric. Anyway, I won't go on about him because that's a bit of a detour, but he was a remarkable person and deeply venerated because of his incredible kindness. He was like an exemplar of Maitreya's kindness, deeply wise and actually a great calligrapher, lots of other attributes, but he's known for his simplicity and his kindness. He loved playing with the children, kind of like Maitreya with his sack of goodies, very similar kind of thing. So we can work on our mind, we can work on our shortcomings, look at our mind, see our weaknesses, our imperfections, and work on them. And this is where we need to be kind-hearted to ourselves as well as to other beings, not to just be critical about our faults, but to see them with compassion and work on them. It's easier to be kind to another person than to be kind to oneself. If we're just critical, it's harder to see our faults and work on them. If we can look at them honestly and accept them, then we can do something. We're not just saying, well, that's the way I am and too bad. We're saying, oh, look what I've been doing. I can change. Look how that worked out. That didn't turn out so well. How did that happen? What did I do or not do? Here's where I can do something differently. We can do this. We can change. Even Maitreya still has work to do. So do we. It was helpful. It's helpful to know that no matter how advanced we may be or think we are, there's always work to do. Well, in particular, Maitreya represents joy and hope for the future. And I think we could all do with a little joy and hope for the future in this time. He's not some savior who's going to come and fix the world. It's not like that. In earlier times, he was, as I said, he was greatly venerated. People would make statues of him, pray that he would come and help the world, because things were just as bad then as they are now, probably. It goes back and forth. They had problems then. Maitreya, please come and help us. We need help. Well, we can understand this. But it's not that he's going to come down and save everybody. It's more that it's up to us. We can see Maitreya as that great example of loving kindness and joy and hope for the future, that joyful manifestation of the laughing Buddha. No matter what, he knows, as it says in the offertory, it's unsafe to inhabit the three realms of existence. Our world is not safe. It's not some happy paradise. It's not, everything is rosy. Unsafe to inhabit this world, and yet still he has a heart filled with joy and merriment. How does he do that? Because he sees beyond this immediate suffering that we see ourselves, that we may be immersed in. There's something beyond that. There's the joy of training. There's hope for the future, hope for this very moment, in fact, because everybody has that goodness within themselves. Everybody has that potential for kindness, for generosity, and for joy, Joy can spring up spontaneously. It's not something that, we have to go and look for, although it helps to practice it. But misery is something we have to cultivate, and it's hard work. As many of us know, being miserable is work. Being joyful is like, I think it's kind of our natural state, actually, but we cover it up with sadness and worry and fear for the future. And to just remember that joy is really our natural state of being. The scientists say that humans are wired for worry, wired for fear, wired for looking on the dark side, because if we didn't, we wouldn't run away from the big, fierce animals with sharp teeth. We would say, oh, nice pussycat, But no, we think, oh my God, look at that thing, I'm going to run away from it. And that saves us. So here we are still surviving because of that fearful aspect. Well, if we know that, it's actually helpful. Oh, here I am, I'm afraid. Maybe I don't have to be. Maybe it's just this kind of wired-in thing. But our natural nature, underneath that, is that joyful aspect. Something that sees beyond the tiger slavering over us. It sees beyond our immediate circumstances. That sees something that's real, true Buddha nature. That the unborn, undying, unchanging. Within this Saha world, within all the suffering, all the change, all the difficulty, all the stuff we endure, whether this year, last year, later on, who knows how it's all going to be. I think things will get better, and we can aspire to do our part for that. It's up to us to help the world. We can't wait for Maitreya to come. At the very least, it will be 2,500 years from now. At most, it will be 5.5 billion. I think we better get on with it, We haven't got much time. Never has it been more apparent than now, this need, this pressing need to do something about our world. Climate change, the pandemic, all the many things we keep talking about. They all need our help, And kindness and generosity and that faith in true goodness and that faith in the brightness, not just the darkness, that really helps. To act both collectively and as individuals. How can I help? How can we all help? What can we do? We can't wait for somebody else to do something. It's up to us to make changes and help where we can, and do it with a kind heart, not with a critical mind that says, why isn't that person recycling? Why isn't that person doing what they should be doing? Not judging other people because they're not doing what we think they should be doing. That's not it. It's more, how can I help? Not looking to see, why aren't they doing it too? During this pandemic, we've seen constant examples of generosity, incredible dedication from healthcare workers working unbelievable hours, exhausted, some dying, some committing suicide because they can't stand it any longer. Incredible generosity of people, selfless dedication, doctors and nurses, bus drivers, people giving food to the hungry, all kinds of people, seen and unseen, huge numbers that we don't even know about, far more than we might think. Just showing that kind, benevolent heart that we all have somewhere within. These are all Bodhisattvas, helping beings. They're all Maitreya, They give us hope for our world, and they give us joy. When we hear stories of people helping other beings, there's a joyfulness that arises. That lovely story about the person at Dairy Queen. Thank you. You all know the story about the Dairy Queen. One person goes to this Dairy Queen, and a whole line of takeout, people coming in their cars to get takeout meals. And this one person says, I'd like to pay for the person behind me. And that person did the same. Went on for days. Person after person after person, like 900 and some people. For days. People would receive the thing that they were given, and then they'd pass on that benefit. I'll pay for the person behind me. That's unbelievable. Who would think it? Who would think such a thing could happen? And yet it did. This incredible generosity, spontaneous kindness. Probably nobody came showing up expecting, except the first person. Nobody thought, I think I'll just pay for the person behind me. Until they saw that generosity shown to them. I can pass that on to the next person. It's wonderful. These are normal people showing up to a Dairy Queen, not specially chosen for their kindness. Bodhisattvas in their cars. Each of us. Could we have risen to that? I think we could. That's lovely. All sorts of stories like this. That's a dramatic one. There's hope for humankind. We're not just self-serving, angry, snarling beasts. There is hope for us. There is kindness, and there is joy within us. We can and we do help beings. And especially when there's some kind of emergency, we help, Lots of merit and kindness being poured out to those in need. Great need for kindness. People hungry, not just in our world, obviously, in our land, but all over the world, people suffering terribly in many ways. And here's Maitreya, the Buddha that is to come, representing that brightness of hope and joy. And that is something that we, as I said, have within us. We can manifest that. When we venerate Maitreya, we're venerating something that is within ourselves. We're not venerating some person up in the sky who's going to come and save us all, as I said. We are all part of Maitreya, and it doesn't mean that we're going to be some being up in the sky surrounded by disciples. It means we're just doing our best as little human beings, driving up to a Dairy Queen and receiving kindness and passing it on, or however it may be that we can find a way to be kind, to look and see, not, okay, I'm going to be kind today, but just, oh, this person needs help. Oh, I can do something about that. Oh, maybe I'll make an offering to the food bank or whatever. Cultivating that and entrusting ourselves to that, that's venerating Maitreya, really. Venerating that aspect of ourselves, our own Buddha nature, that innate goodness, our aspiration for the way. And we're venerating the Buddha nature of all beings, because all of us have that. We're all part of Buddha nature. No one's left out, no one's cut off, no one's separated at all. And it's always been this way. And it always will be this way, no matter what it looks like, no matter what happens, no matter how dark things may appear to be. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same forever. Darkness and light, sadness and joy, sickness and health, life and death, they're all part of our very fabric of our existence. You couldn't have one without the other. They're all part of Buddha nature, right there within it. Nothing cut off, nothing separate, nothing left out. There's always hope in our world, and there can always be joy. Hope isn't just wishful thinking, oh, maybe it'll get better. It's faith. It's faith that fundamentally all is well at bottom, no matter how it may be for us. It's again sound, well, that's all very well for you to say, but actually it is so. And faith and that hope for the world is just turning the heart towards that, entrusting ourselves to that, not just drowning in the sadness and grief, to see that grief and sadness. There's Maitreya, his weeping, weeping over the sorrows of the world, and yet he also has a heart full of joy and merriment. They do not stand against each other. He's not miserable all the time, and he's not just laughing all the time. Both are there. And it's the same for us. Sometimes we're really sad. Sometimes we hear a really sad story. Oh my goodness, how awful, and it's really heartbreaking. And then we hear about the Dairy Queen thing. Or we ourselves are able to do something to benefit beings. And that fills us with joy when we can do something to help, just a sort of spontaneous kindness. We feel joyful when we can do that. We feel good about it. It's not a me being, oh, here I am, this great person. It's more, I was able to do something. How wonderful. Because how much help we have received in our lives, how much kindness, how much generosity we have received from the universe, from other beings, from our parents, our friends, all those, here as monks, all those who support us, the incredible kindness of beings. And can we pass it on? We certainly can, by just allowing it to go forth. Joy, the joy of training, that joy of being able to do something, to help, that arises, the joy that arises just in a moment. We look up and see that lovely sunrise, or we look at just seeing a being doing something, or just being themselves, and there's something in you that says, yes, yes, I'm so glad that being is here in this world, not even thinking about what they're doing, they're just living their life. Because every now and then just look and think, I'm so glad you're here, You may not even say so, just to look up and see those joyful aspects of life. To see that beauty, actually, And this is what Maitreya has to teach us today. Never forget to look up, to trust in the goodness of beings, the hope for us, not just for the future, but for this very moment. Here we are, drawing our next breath. What a gift, wonderful gift our life is. Even when it seems awful, it doesn't stay awful forever. Things do change, things do get better, things get worse again. But it's all just part of the fabric of the whole thing. We wouldn't want it any other way. And that's Maitreya's teaching for us today. So I wish everybody a happy new year, and may it be better, peaceful. It'll be better, it'll be worse in many ways, but may things improve for our human race. It's been a bit rough lately. With all of this, having said, yes, there is fundamentally everything is okay, and yet I think we could use a break. So take care. Thank you.